ought to some intentionality?
I'm saying essential to consciousness is intentionality because when we do a phenomenological eidetic reduction, we find out that within any act of consciousness, there's an ego cogito cogitatum.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I would agree with that part.
Okay, so premise number two, great. So premise number two is basically doing a similar method for matter. And it's understanding that when I take the essential structure of matter, which means bracket out any preconceived metaphysics and find the experience of matter, its eidetic structure, I find that matter has extension, length, breadth, and depth. So
Right.
extension is the central property of matter in this. Now, if you disagree, do you have a defeater for this?
No, no, I think essential to matter is extension.
Okay, so premise number three would basically do the same thing in saying that using phenomenological eidetic reduction, you cannot get intentionality from extension, that nowhere in extension is intentionality. So even though the object that we experience, like the I think a thought, the thought like the table, might be part of the act of consciousness, which means that it is extended. It itself does not have intentionality. So
Yeah, I
extension.
don't yeah, I don't agree with this. Well, I mean, there's
Okay,
two things to say here. The first thing to say is it doesn't have to be essential to matter that it has intentionality. Um, it could be an accidental property of matter that there's intentionality. Could be
no,
the
no,
case.
no, no. What I'm saying is the premise is basically extend intentionality can't come from extension, the attribute of extension.
Yeah, I disagree with that.
Okay, so what is your defeater for that?
Well, okay, I mean, I thought I already told you that. I mean, I think there's two plausible stories you could tell here. The first plausible story you could tell here is you might think that there's a composite formed by um, the matter in the brain or something, and that composite creates thoughts. So the composite object formed from, mere logical simples, which are material, create thoughts. The second convincing story you could tell is you might think that the mere logical simples, which are material, they have intentionality. So all the matter in the universe out there possesses intentionality,
Well, the second
which
one
is
is then
panpsychism.
okay. So that I'm not arguing against panpsychism. Okay, so I'm basically saying this. So this is premise three is saying that intentionality can't come from extension. Now, if you're basically saying that this substance, besides extension, also has intentionality, more like kind of like a neutral substance of some sort, I'm cool with that. I'm not arguing against that.
Right, but
This is only
your
basically
argument,
saying that intent. This is only saying that the attribute of intentionality can't manifest from extension. That's it. Now,
but
if you
you
disagree with
realize
that
under
one, do you
some,
have a defeater for that one?
you realize that under panpsychism, that
I'm not arguing against panpsychism. This
well,
argument is
under
not an argument
panpsychism,
against
I think you're
panpsychism.
giving an argument. Well, your argument is incompatible with panpsychism here
No, it's not.
because
Not an argument.
the
It's not
things have
incompatible with
extension and they
panpsychism.
have intentionality.
Okay, so Julian, let me explain this. You could have something hypothetically, and I'm not denying that. You could have a substance which, in some sense, it's neutral, and out of it, it manifests both extension and intentionality. Extension could be something like a relational attribute. I'm cool with that. I'm not arguing against it. Premise three is only basically stating because it's saying that materialism would be a metaphysics that states that that extension is an intrinsic property. This is its sole intrinsic property. If that's the case, what I'm saying is that intentionality can't manifest from extension. That's it.
Well, but okay, through like Cavendish's view, for example, there's extension there, and the material things are extended things out in the world, and they have intentionality. So that does contradict with your
No, it
view.
doesn't contradict because you're not. I'm saying there's a possibility of other metaphysics out there. So the idea is this, Julian. We're looking at this because the things that you're talking about, they could be idealism, it could be panpsychism, it could be any of these things. I'm trying to understand how something that's extended, that the attribute of extension itself, does not manifest intentionality. That's it. And you're not dealing with that.
Wait, but
So
the
give me a
thing is,
defeater for that. Just give me
extend.
a defeater for that. Just give me a
Well,
defeater.
under the view I gave you, it is extended and it has intentionality.
No, that's we're
That's
understanding
what
it
you're arguing
conceptually.
against.
Julian, we're understanding it conceptually because the idea would be something like this, that if you want to sit there and say that extended stuff has intentionality, then you would say that these are two attributes that are intrinsic to this, or in some sense
No.
part of this. So you're not dealing with the point would be that when we understand, look, obviously, if we're taking something like the table is extended. Okay, it has extension. And from the extension, just something having pure spatial extension, that does not get the aboutness of thought. That's the idea, just conceptually that. So show me or give me a defeater in saying how something just having spatial extension brings about intentionality.
No one said that having spatial extension on its own brings about
That's my argument,
intentionality.
Julian. That's what I'm arguing.
What conclusion are you even trying to draw here?
I'm trying to argue, and this is it. Given that materialism would basically be a metaphysics that holds that extension is an intrinsic property, it's an intrinsic property, then basically premise 3 is to go that shows that extension itself, that's what premise 3 is saying, extension itself does not have the power or ability to manifest intentionality. Those sole
Okay, what is the
attributes.
conclusion of the argument you're giving now? Like the entire conclusion of this argument.
The entire conclusion of the argument is that you cannot get consciousness from matter.
Yeah, and how do you get there from premise 3?
Look at, because I have basically stated that extension is the sole intrinsic property of matter.
Yeah, it doesn't follow.
Well, yeah, it does follow if it's a sole intrinsic property. Because it's saying if that's what it is, if that's what it is, because you did say it, you just told me that you said, look, yeah, I'm not saying that I can get intentionality from extension.
Look, it doesn't
but
follow.
That means if that's all matter is, then you can't get it from it.
It doesn't follow. Wait, it doesn't follow that intentionality can't come from matter if it's not an intrinsic property.
What? Okay, so let's go back to premise 3. Premise 3. Hold on, Julian. You didn't have an issue with premise 3. So we're saying the attribute of extension itself. The attribute of extension itself cannot generate intentionality. Now, if you disagree with that, provide a defeater from. That is okay. Claim. Okay, but so let me ask you. You agree? Then if you agree with that claim, everything follows. Check the argument follows.
Okay, because you're changing the premise then.
Look, no, I'm not changing the premise because there's previous premises. It's saying matter has the intrinsic attribute of intentionality. If that's its intrinsic attribute, that is what it is, understood as solidity. That's the point. And it's saying that solidity cannot generate intentionality.
Look, it was originally the case.
So tell me, you had no premises you disagreed with. The argument did follow. It logically followed.
Can I talk though?
Oh, go ahead.
Give you your chance to talk. I want to talk too. Look, you originally told me that all you're saying here is that intentionality is not an intrinsic property of matter. Now you're saying that intentionality can't come from matter. Those are two different statements.
That's not what. Okay. So the first, and pay attention, Julian. Premise 1 was consciousness has intentionality as its essential attribute.
I know that.
Okay. Okay, well then follow. The next one is that matter has extension as its essential attribute. And materialism would go so far as to basically say that's its intrinsic property, not just a relational one. So that is its intrinsic property. Premise number 3 is basically saying that, okay, I cannot get intentionality from extension. And if that's the case, and if extension is the sole intrinsic property of matter, you would not be able to get intentionality from matter.
Okay, that first of all, under panpsychism, you can get intentionality from matter.
I'm not arguing panpsychism. I'm arguing against materialism. Do you understand that? No, I'm not. Let me explain this to you. This is an argument against materialism, not panpsychism. Okay,
you can be
a panpsychist
and a materialist.
What are you talking about?
No, you can be a panpsychist and a materialist.
I don't really. No, I would see the two as different. We're just going to quibble on terms.
I'm saying they're consistent with each other.
Okay, then the point
and
basically.
I'm giving you a materialist panpsychist view that is disagreeing with everything you say.
Okay, Julian. Okay, here's the point. If you want to say that there's some neutral substance that has both extension and intentionality to it, I have no problem with that.
It's
I'm
a
not
material
arguing
substance.
against that. I'm not arguing against
It's a
panpsychism in
material
this case.
substance. It's not a neutral substance. It's a material substance.
Then we're just defining terms in different ways. That's not how I understand the word material. I do
No,
not
no, no, no.
understand.
I'm
And
telling
okay,
you under
then
this
your
view that I'm
concept of
giving you.
material is your very
You're
idiosyncratic
disagreeing
definition
with
of it.
the.
I
You're
define what
disagreeing.
material is.
You're disagreeing with the version of panpsychism I'm putting forth, but you're not realizing you're disagreeing with it.
No, I'm not. Okay, here's the
This
point.
is a
The
materialist
version of
panpsychism.
panpsychism you're calling panpsychism is materialism. I am not really based. Here's the thing. Your version of panpsychism is not how I understand materialism. You want to call it
It's not
materialism.
materialism. It's
Can you
look,
shut the? But I'm not arguing against panpsychism. I
yes,
am
you
not
are.
fucking
You're
arguing. No,
arguing
I'm
against my
not. You
version of
fucking
it.
idiot. God damn it. The argument is not against panpsychism. It's
You're
against
arguing against
materialism.
my
Look,
version of
I'm not going to
panpsychism that I'm
deal.
giving
Look,
here.
I don't want to go into this. It's not a position I'm dealing with. I'm dealing
Yes, you
against
are.
materialism,
You're
not
rejecting
against
the materialist
panpsychism.
panpsychist
Okay?
position.
That's the point. Now, if you want to bring something else up, that's fine. I am not dealing with panpsychism. This argument has nothing to do with fucking panpsychism. You're not responding to my argument. You're basically saying, but I'm not arguing against panpsychism. This is not an argument against panpsychism, for fuck's sake.
This
Let
is
me
the
ask you a
view that
question. We'll
I'm
go on this.
forwarding
Which
right
premise do you
here.
disagree with?
Everything is
Just tell
material.
me out of those which are the premises you disagree with.
Three. I
And
told
then
you it's
if you do
three.
that, do you have a defeater for them? Go
I
ahead.
told you it's three.
We're going on.
I disagree with three.
Okay, you disagree with premise 3. So what is your defeater for premise 3?
Premise three. I think that consciousness can come from material things.
That's not what it says. That's not what premise 3 says. You dishonest fuck.
You literally. Oh my god! You literally just said. You
No,
literally
no,
said.
premise 3 is not that. Premise 3 is not that, you dishonest fuck. Premise 3 is basically that intentionality can't come from extension. That's what premise 3 is,
Yeah, who's
okay?
saying it fucking
So
can't come
please
from
deal
extension?
with the premise correctly
That's
and
what
stop
it's
playing
exactly.
games. That's premise
That's
3.
exactly what I
So
said. I
you're
said I'm
wrong.
disagreeing with
You
it
didn't
because you
even
said
understand
intentionality
it.
can come
You
from
didn't even read
extension.
premise 3 correctly. So I'm going to give you a
You're not
second chance
listening.
for a
That's what I
serious defeater
literally.
if you
This is
disagree
what
with
I said.
premise 3. But all I'm saying is that intentionality can't come from extension. Go ahead.
I literally just said I disagree because intentionality can come from extension.
Okay, so
You're
you're
not
saying it
listening.
can come. Are you saying it can come from extension? You said matter. I said extension.
But okay, matter, an intrinsic property of matter is its extension. So if it can come from an extended thing, it can come from a material thing.
What are you talking about? And you just don't even understand what you're talking about. Okay, so
Are
a
you?
material
You're seriously
object, given
losing it.
premise 2, is it has the essential attribute of extension. That's basically it. Premise 3 was to go in and to show how intentionality cannot come from extended. From
Yes, and
extension. That's basically
I'm
it.
saying
And so
intentionality can come
let's
from
kind of
extended
understand
things.
this, Julian. I
I'm
will
saying
explain this to you and
intentionality
then I will
can come
give you
from
a chance
extended
to
things. I
kind of
don't know
deal with
what you're
this. Can
confused
you kind
about.
of shut up? Because you did say you disagreed with premise 3.
I did. I literally just told you that I think intentionality can come from extended things.
Okay. Well, then I would say that basically you are flawed in your conceptual understanding of this. Because if you understand via phenomenological analysis the idea of extension, and then you understand intentionality, you would understand that all the extension gives you is further extension. You're not going to have an aboutness or thinking of thought. And the
You're
point
just
was
making the
basically
question.
there when it's I think a thought, even though the thought object itself can have extension. The idea is that the intentionality of it, the subjective experience, can't come from or
Can
is
you show me
not
the
conceptually
contradiction?
derivable from the objective extension of things. That
Can
would
you
be
show me
it.
the contradiction? Show me the contradiction then.
I don't have to show you the logical contradiction. That's a nonsensical point. This is
What? Okay, you're
cheap
saying it
tactic.
can come
I
from
don't
this
have to
and
show
you
you
don't
the
have to
logic
show me the
because I'm not
contradiction?
claiming it's a logical contradiction. I'm justifying it by phenomenological analysis.
You're
That's
saying they're
basically it. And by the
incompatible, that they
phenomenological
can't be
analysis
this
of
case.
it, it's that when I
Show me the
understand
contradiction in
this in
this case.
terms of extension, an object, something having spatial extension, length, breadth, and depth, that just would imply further extension, and that would not have within it or the ability to manifest intentionality. That would be
Well,
it.
that's completely doesn't follow. Like that's just saying, okay, look, the intrinsic property, for example, of a chair, is say that it has maybe two or more legs, and
No,
there's a
that's
seat on
not,
the
then you don't
chair.
even understand what it is. You don't know the intrinsic
Okay, and
property. Okay, the intrinsic property we're talking about here of the chair is its spatial extension. That's it. That
no,
it's
look,
extended in
look.
space. It
Oh
has
my God,
length,
I'm
breadth, and
not.
depth.
That's not what
You
I'm trying
did
to tell
agree
you.
earlier. You said, look, I'm not going to disagree with you. I'm not
It's
saying
like it's
that
unfair talking to
extension
you
can bring
because
intentionality. You were just trying to go down some more of a panpsychist route of basically saying you think and somehow that there's this more fundamental kind of attribute or substance which both of these two are derived from. That's it. But you're just making stupid points.
you don't even give me a chance to talk. It's
Okay, then we're going
horrible
to go in.
dialectic. It's
So you don't. Okay, then tell me
Wait,
your defeater premise
Nyklot,
3.
would you be willing to give Julian like a minute to talk?
Yeah, well, let's see. Give me your defeater premise 3. Go ahead, Julie.
first of all, you were completely misunderstanding my point about the chair. I get the chair as a material and extended thing, but there's other intrinsic properties there that you might want to name.
You're wriggling.
The point is that you're not going to get all the information of the properties that a chair can possess from its intrinsic properties. That's why we have things like accidental properties that are a part of the intrinsic nature of a thing, yet the objects can possess these things. So while I'm not claiming that consciousness is an intrinsic property of material things, I'm claiming it's an accidental property of material things. Um, so yeah, you're just misunderstanding that, and I don't even think you're trying to listen to me. You're just trying to respond.
Yeah,
And the
but your point
second
had
part
nothing to
is,
do.
look, and I'm just telling you that your argument's not going to follow here. It's not going to follow because you're saying that, you know, um, intention
Don't
isn't
stutter.
an intrinsic part of material things. And yes, anyone can agree with that, but it doesn't follow that intention can't come from these material things.
Okay. What I said is this, and you didn't seem to be doing this. Deal with the specific point of premise 3, which is the idea, and don't go into accidental properties and all this. Deal with the point of premise 3, which is the idea of intentionality being able to manifest from extension. That's what
Nyklot,
I'm
why did I
asserting.
bring up accidental properties?
Okay, because it's irrelevant to the point. I'm not.
Why did I bring up them? Can you at least generously tell me my position if you were listening?
Accidental property would be, you would say something like even a human, like its consciousness would not be accidental, it'd be essential as a rational animal. An accidental property would be like, let's say, a human having something like red hair, because it's not
Yeah, I'm
essential
not
for a human having
asking
red
you
hair.
to
So
tell
I
me.
don't know why I'm not bringing up Aristotelian concepts. These essential and accidental properties are more Aristotelian. This is irrelevant to the point, this Aristotelian outlook. I'm specifically dealing with the point of understanding something as extension and whether or not extension can manifest intentionality, and I'm saying no to that. That's it. You just went
I'm
on this
asking you
tangent,
to.
which is completely irrelevant to that. So,
I'm asking you to
Julian,
give
can you
a generous
please
interpretation.
go into that specific thing and show me how from extension you can get intentionality? Go ahead.
I'm asking you to give a generous interpretation of my position. I'm not asking
Okay,
you
you
to tell me
can.
what essential properties are and accidental properties are. I'm asking you to tell me what I told you.
Okay, so you haven't been able to provide a defeater for premise 3.
I want you to actually listen to what I'm
Premise
saying.
3 stands.
All I'm asking
The
you is
argument
to
is
repeat what I'm
valid,
saying. I'm just
therefore it's
asking you to listen
sound.
to me, and you're
There
not
you go.
listening. You're not able to like. I repeated myself 2 times.
I gave you multiple chances to provide defeaters for the premises. You agreed with
You
premise
didn't
1, you
even
agreed
listen to
with
what I
premise
said.
2. You did not provide any serious defeater for premise
You
3,
didn't listen to
either in
what
the
I
form
said.
of
It's
an undercut or
frustrating.
rebuttal defeater.
Like
So
when I
there you go.
engage in these conversations, I at least want someone to take into account the points that I'm saying, and I asked you to repeat what I said, and you just had no idea.
Wait,
You didn't know.
Nyklot. I dare you to accurately represent Julian's position here. Go ahead.
I don't care. I don't have. I mean, the point was, did he provide? He didn't. I mean, he talked about accidental and essential properties, which had nothing to do with premise 3.
You can't.
So I am basically wanting to go into the idea: can he provide a defeater for premise 3? We don't have to go on tangents, Julian. I mean, we could look. Aristotelian metaphysics is an
If
interesting
you're saying my
concept.
argument has
I mean,
nothing to do with
hold
what you're
on, hold
saying, at
on.
least be able to.
Aristotelian metaphysics, as far as essential and accidental attributes, it's an interesting concept, but it doesn't have anything to do with the point that I'm making. It has zero thing to do with the point that I'm making. That being the case, what I'm asking is for him to provide a defeater to premise 3. He was unable to do so.
What did
So
Julian
premise
say?
3 stands.
Can
The
you recount what
argument
Julian
is
said?
sound. So it
What is the
shows,
difference
you can look
between
at
an
it,
intrinsic
logic is
property and
valid. You
an
can actually
essential
see the
property?
argument.
Nyklot,
how
what
it
is the difference
follows.
between
And
an
then
intrinsic
each
property?
premise, I gave phenomenological justifications for each of those.
Oh
So
my God,
Julian
stop
has to show
rambling. No one
either how the
cares.
phenomenological justification doesn't support it, in the sense that basically it's an undercut or defeater, or he has to show how the phenomenology is wrong, and that would be in a rebuttal defeater. He hasn't done either of those two. So that's what I'm asking. And that's it. Either one of those two things. It's your two options you got, Julian. On that note,
What is the difference
yes,
between
the argument stands.
what does he
Next
get to
person wants to
ramble
go.
and then okay? What is the difference between an essential property and an intrinsic property?
Oh, an extra. I would have to say, if I would understand an intrinsic property, it would be okay. So you'd have to contrast intrinsic with relational as you contrast essential with accidental. So an intrinsic property is what something has in itself, independent of how it relates to other objects. A relational property is the property that it has in relation to other objects.
What's the difference
So,
between intrinsic and essential
oh,
property?
okay, hold on. Let me just go into intrinsic versus relational. So let's say, for example, we're living in a matrix, and we have extended objects, and these extended objects make it so other things can't block them, can stop them from entering their space. That would be impenetrability. Impenetrability is a relational property, meaning this thing has the ability to stop other objects from entering its space, but it's not solid, because intrinsically what it is in itself is just computer code. That's the idea. So we would say that when we look at this matrix, that it does have the relational property of impenetrability. It's stopping other things from entering its space, but it does not have that as an intrinsic property, which is solidity, because at a fundamental level, it's just computer code. And the reason that's very relevant for my argument, because if I was just saying
Are
that
you going to tell
extension
us
was
the
a
difference
relational
between
property,
intrinsic
which is
and essential
if it was just
properties?
relational, then what it would mean is that that's not the way the object is in itself. And you could have panpsychism. That's the argument for
Okay,
panpsychism, is that basically this is the only property, or this is the main property that we can know an object would have in itself, as opposed to how it behaves towards other things.
are you going to tell us
And
the
I didn't
difference
argue
between
against that position at all. If you want to
intrinsic
be a
and essential
panpsychist, that's
properties?
cool. Actually, I'm a panpsychist, so I don't see how we
Are
have
you
a
going to
problem
tell us
there.
the difference between
But on that
intrinsic and
note, I
essential
explained to you what an
properties?
intrinsic versus an relational property is. I can also explain to you what an essential versus natural accidental property is. This is going
No,
more
tell
from
me what an
Aristotle.
You
intrinsic
missed the
versus
mark two
essential property
times.
is.
Humans, they have an essence, form,
Oh
a
my
rational
God!
animal. Their rationality
That's
is
not what I
something
asked
essential to
you.
them. Whereas the hair color, like if one has red hair and
Wait,
one has
Oh
blonde
my
Nyklot.
God!
hair, that is going to be an
Nyklot, do you
accidental
agree that
property.
there
But
is
this
a
is all
relevant
relevant to
distinction?
the point that I'm making.
Nyklot, do
I
you
went through
agree
the
that there's a
premises. You weren't able to provide kind
Nyklot?
of sound defeaters to them. And on that note, I am done with you. Does anybody
Yeah,
else want to go
yeah,
into it?
Nyklot, do you agree that there's a relevant distinction in an essential property and an intrinsic property?
Okay, so does anybody else want to go?
That's a yes or a no, by the way.
Once you had your chance, you failed. You were not
That's a
able to
yes or a no,
Are
provide a
you
by the
going to
way.
tell
defeater.
us yes or
Actually,
no? I asked you a
Julian tried to do
question.
a little bit
You
of a
spent
better
an
job.
hour rambling. You didn't fucking tell me the answer.
Because I'm not
That's
here to
not
end.
enough.
Okay, I am here in these dialectical obligations to present an argument to
You're
show you
not.
that
You're
it's
not
valid.
fucking
Hold
listening to your
on, I'm
opponent.
to show you that it's valid. Okay, the logic is valid, and then to justify each
One
premise.
of the
I
premises
believe
is being
I've
called in
done that.
question.
I believe I've done that, and I'm also here to open it up for defeaters, either in the form of an undercut or rebuttal defeater. So I could ask you a question and see if you know what an undercutter and rebuttal defeater is, and if you do, which one do you think you provided for premise three? Because I don't think you provide any defeater. Go
You
ahead.
didn't even answer the question I asked you.
Okay, so you didn't provide either an undercut or rebuttal defeater for premise three. Therefore, it stands. I'm getting a little bit of a headache. I got to have my salmon now. But it was
He's
fun
just
What is the
talking to
difference
speedrunning
people.
between an
debates.
intrinsic and essential property? Are you going to answer it or no?
Two different things. I gave you the contrast of an intrinsic versus relational, and essential
That
versus
doesn't
an
tell me what the difference
accidental.
between intrinsic
Okay.
and essential.
Okay. I gave you the explanation for it in the context of
No,
Aristotelian
you didn't. What's the
metaphysics
difference between the two?
versus a Kantian one in that. And so that's sometimes just explain it. People can actually give
In the
you
literature, people
contrasting
use
things.
intrinsic
So I
properties.
said, like, take a human. In Aristotelian metaphysics, a human would have an essence, rationality. That would be an essential attribute. The hair color is accidental because it's
I
not
didn't ask you
essential
for
to
a
human
distinction
to have
between
blonde
essential
hair
and
like me.
accidental.
Now, also, at the same time, I explained intrinsic and relational to you in case you're interested. And
That's not what I
intrinsic
asked
property
either.
is what it has in itself, independent of relating to other objects. A relational property is the property it has as far as relating to other objects. But I gave you multiple chances to provide defeaters for my premises. You weren't able to do so, and that's it. On that note, I am going ahead to get something to eat. Also, this is fucking killing me, this lack of caffeine. So, what the hell? Everyone have a fun one. But next time, do a better job, Julian, and see if you can actually provide a real defeater for my premise.
Just speed running
I'm gonna
debates.
block you, but okay.
Okay, that's fine.
See you, Nyklot.
Yeah, see you. Hey, Squiddy, real quickly before I go, what do you think about this new method?
It's not
What new
good,
method? What new
Nyklot.
method?
Uh,
What new method?
just to stand your ground, force people to provide defeaters.
I like it. I do have some slight disagreements with the way you go about it, but yeah, it's overall, it's pretty good.
Wait, can you talk to Zizo, Nyklot?
Wait, about what?
The argument and whether or not it's sound.
Wait, which argument?
The
Did you
one
write
in
it